All right, hello and welcome everyone. My name is Michael Burrows and I serve as director of the Kegley Institute of Ethics. And on behalf of the Institute, thanks for taking some time out of your evening to join us tonight for a very special event, Ethics and Leadership, a conversation with Dr. Mary Barlow. I want to begin briefly by thanking our supporting sponsors who make this program possible. This is the Kegley family, Valley Strong Credit Union, Kaiser Permanente, and Adventist Health Bakersfield, and also the Kern County Library One Book Project. And I also want to thank our CSU IT team that has helped us with the technology for tonight's event, which is increasingly important this day and age. So a few words on the origins of this event and kind of how this series developed. So the Kegley Institute organized this conversation and conversations in this series with the aim of considering as a community both the challenges and the importance of ethical leadership. And a lot of times we study leadership with larger than life leaders throughout history, but we have amazing leaders in our own backyard, right? And by talking with them, it kind of gives us a chance to think about our own leadership development and think about how leaders face ethical and organizational challenges in our own community. And so we're very grateful tonight that a longtime leader in our community, Dr. Mary Barlow, has agreed to join us and to share her insight and experience with us. So a few notes on the procedure for tonight, just so you know. So I have a few preset questions for Dr. Barlow that I'll ask and we'll talk about early on. But then a lot of the night's going to be me moderating a Q&A session with all of your questions. And for those questions, you can submit them via the Q&A function in Zoom. This should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen and say Q&A. No, you can submit questions at any time. So if you want to get in on the action soon, right, you want to be in that first in that queue, enter your questions there. And I'm going to do my best to get to as many of those as possible tonight, right? So I'll do my best on that. But please do, ask something because of interest to you. Just submit the question there, and I'll do my best to get to it. And with that, I'm honored to introduce our guest tonight. So Dr. Mary Barlow has served as Kern County Superintendent of Schools since 2017 and provides leadership in that capacity for 47 Kern County School Districts serving over 190,000 students. She's also a CSU Bakersfield alum and earned her doctorate in organizational leadership from the University of LaVerne. Although Dr. Barlow has spent the majority of her career in education, she's also active as a leader in many local and statewide organizations. She spearheaded, for example, the formation of the Kern River Valley Collaborative, which is a network of agencies dedicated to delivering medical, dental, and social services to Kern River Valley children and their families. And she serves on several organizational boards. Dr. Barlow also serves our local community through the Kern County Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, the Kern Economic Development Council, the Kern County Network for Children, and the Rotary Club of Bakersfield, amongst many others. So Dr. Barlow, just want to start by saying thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us tonight. We really appreciate it.
And I am very humbled to join you tonight. Thank you so much.
Sure, of course. So the topic of our conversation tonight is broadly ethical leadership. And just to start, I'm wondering if you could talk to us a bit about, in your life, persons either near to you or from afar who have served as particularly influential examples of ethical leadership, people maybe have influenced you in your career.
That's a great way to start. And I know it sounds very standard, but genuinely, my parents were both very influential in who I became as a person and then later a leader. Taught me from the earliest time about integrity and honesty and that your word is your honor. But I grew up in a time when women were not necessarily in leadership. I was born in 1962, so you didn't see many women political leaders or business leaders. And my mom in particular told me, and this was in 1974, I believe, you could grow up to be the first female senator of California, which was something I'd never wanted to do or aspire to. But I just thought it was important that she, thought so much of what I could do and become. And so that inspired me. Genuinely, I've been impressed by the quiet courage of people. And that's what's influenced my leadership, both from their writing and their actions. So when I look at leaders who have a servant's heart, leaders who are courageous, leaders who seek justice and build community. People who come to mind, the earliest people were Eleanor Roosevelt and what she did during, just establishing and fighting for civil rights for African Americans, Asian Americans, and women. More recently, John McCain, John Lewis, and RBG. I mean, just even the loss of those two great giants, RBG and John Lewis this year, they led by example. They led by their word, and they were unbroken despite many, many obstacles that were in their way. And then, you know, Michael, you and I have talked before. I have a poem that I often refer to, and it's written or attributed to Mother Teresa, and it's Anyways. And it's about doing the right thing, even if it's hard, even if it's unpopular, and even if it's not recognized, and even if it won't necessarily be appreciated. It's about doing the right thing. So I don't know, I'm optimistic. I'm encouraged by these people. And so that's my guiding North Star.
So that's interesting. You know, in part of your answer there, you're talking about, you know, doing the right thing, right? You end on that as kind of being central to leadership. And when I hear that, and of course I'm an ethics institute director, so ethics is kind of on my mind a lot, but this kind of pings me a little bit. And I'm wondering how you think about, you know, given you're large scale leader running a large scale organization, working with lots of different people on a daily basis. What is the role of ethics in being an effective leader? Because we understand, hey, it's important to be ethical, but how has it been important in your work in being an effective, impactful leader?
So for me, I think it sets the boundaries of how a leader will operate, regardless of the context of the situation. Because with leadership comes great responsibility. And I'm jokingly saying that from Spider-Man, but there is an inherent power really that comes with leadership. And so we have to be doubly careful not to use that to self-promote, but rather to promote the good of all, beneficence. And so I am influenced and have done a lot of reading around Kuznets and Posner, Peter Senge, Greenleaf, and I really do believe in that servant's heart. And I really do believe that if we are leaders who make good choices and we are informed by our ethics, how we allocate resources, our time, our funding, our personnel, those are driven by our ethics, right? I feel like our courage to sometimes say things that are difficult and unpopular, it is very important. Right.
So this kind of makes me think about, you know, the challenges that, many of the people in the audience tonight, right? So we have about 150 people right now with us. And I know a lot of these people are CSU students. Some are young professionals in our community, people from all different walks of life, but a lot of people who are interested in leadership. And I'm wondering if there are, you know, if you're thinking about speaking to young or aspirational leaders, are there 2 or 3 areas of advice you would give to those persons in regard to what they could do to take next steps to be effective or ethical leaders, or things that could help shape that path for them? Sure.
Definitely ethics are just like leadership, learned. I don't think we're born inherently with those. It's a life journey and it's a practice. And so for me, one of the things that I would say, first of all, is that relationships matter. So the first thing you need to know is yourself and understand what makes you tick, what makes you interested, what you want to spend your life and your passion and your time with. So what is your purpose? And then build teams with those people who have the common shared purpose, because we get our work done by working through others, not in isolation. And then you can build out an organization with structures and systems so that you can reach greater good. For me, I kind of look at one of the important things to recognize when thinking about ourselves is you need to take time to step aside and really look internally at your heart and what's important to you, and recognize that all of your previous experiences, good and bad, will influence who you are as a person and perhaps can influence your decisions. And so there's 3 things that I really think are important. We need to suit up, we need to show up, and we need to speak up. Okay. So to suit up for me, it means that we do our homework and we really understand a problem. And to do that, you have to be a humble listener. And I didn't learn that early. You have to ask a lot of questions, suspend judgment, and really not make any assumptions, which is not easy when we first start up the leadership practice. So it's important to make sure that we seek a lot of different perspectives from different people, you know, to really understand this, all stakeholders and how they're feeling in a situation. I would say you take a learner's stance, and then once you understand, you've done your homework, right? You have a broader understanding of the situation. And then it's important to show up. So a lot of people miss that step, not a lot of people, but people do miss that step. So it's an occasional thing or a almost every time thing. But if someone can count on you, if you are reliable and you will show up every time, that is important. That role and that responsibility, that's your word. And sometimes it's inconvenient, but you're still going to show up. So it's important to be at those important times and places. And then finally, speak up. When you've studied the issue, when you understand it, you need to be courageous and speak out. Even when it might be unpopular, it could negatively impact you personally. For me, I just really take to heart, silence means complicity when something unethical is occurring around us. So it's really important to speak up. And if doing those three things, you can go far. Remember, we always work through people and with people and never give up.
So that's a lot of that's really powerful. And there's a couple of things you said in terms of, you know, early on being in touch with yourself as a leader, and then also showing up. But I also know one thing, I mean, a person in your position, I mean, I know how busy you are on a given day. And actually it's a credit to you. You never seem flustered or busy, but I know you are busy, right? So, and with this term balance, right? People talk about having balance in their life, work-life balance, and being able to be in touch with themselves and connect to who they are. And that's really, really important. But how, as a leader, I mean, how do you do that? I mean, how do you stay in touch with yourself? How do you show up when you can't show up to everything? Like, how do you find that balance and stay grounded and do your work in a positive way, even when you have a lot of demands on your time?
Well, most importantly, I count on those who are closest in my inner circle, my immediate family, and then I have an incredibly strong leadership team here at KCSOS and across the broader Kern County education system. So I find balance by being at home with my husband, Steve, and talking with my kids, you know, Matt and Tony and Ryan and Sarah and Fern. That I take the time to ensure that I do that. When I am not, but I also prioritize how I use my time. So I understand that I'm going to have my greatest impact when I am not spread too thin. And so I've been really focused on using the leadership team here at KCSOS and the broader education community to empower them. They have been task force leads, and they are, I stand behind their decisions. And so we're able to do more work and accomplish more through that distributed leadership model. So I think finding balance is because of those relationships, because of that trust, because of what we've built up over years of work together, we are able to accomplish much more.
So this kind of leads me to a next question related to that. I mean, obviously part of being an effective leader is building collaborations effectively, right? And you have a large staff. We mentioned at the start, there's 190,000 students in the 47 districts, which your office is, you know, helping to coordinate. So a really large group of people, not to mention all the teachers that you're working with. What are ways that you effectively lead and develop successful collaborations with that large of an organization, right? Because on the one hand, it seems kind of unwieldy, but obviously you're doing excellent work in that regard with your team. What are some strategies you use to do that effectively in your work?
I think it goes back to first finding that common purpose. What is it that we all feel really committed about? And in Kern County, if you look at all the educators, it's about how do we improve the lives of children and their families? And so that's either addressing the equity gap or just improving outcomes for all students. So that common purpose is where we start. And then with that, those trusting relationships, you have your core team of, there's only a certain number of people you can connect with on a daily basis. So you have to be selective about that. And then those individuals are working with a certain number of leaders, right? Who are then also working with another number of leaders. And so the important thing, though, is that we build up those systems and structures so that we're communicating formally and informally on a regular basis. And we're checking in with everyone, all the stakeholders, including the people who are the end users and those who are closest to the problem, because they are most likely to understand the situation and give us the best feedback about how our leadership decisions impact their lives. Right. And so, it's really important to look at those systems and structures and design them in such a way that they're agile and they can very, not quickly, but they can adjust as needed in a given circumstance. We were lucky, we had some of that in place already with the Kern Education Pledge. And it's been a lot of work to do that and create that over a number of years, but it really comes back to that common purpose, building trust, building relationships, and realizing that collective impact is the way to really affect systemic change.
So that's really interesting. I mean, that common purpose aspect, and I'm wondering, how do you establish that in an organization? Is it how you hire? Is it how you set up your meetings? I mean, to me, establishing a common purpose, it's more than having that stated on your wall, right, in a framed, certificate or something. It's also something that you're probably doing regularly. But I'm curious how you approach establishing a common purpose with your team and your larger community. What does that look like?
So you've named several of the strategies. So some of that includes going out and doing focus groups and making sure that you're talking with diverse stakeholders, that all perspectives are included in the conversation, and that you're doing a general needs assessment, a landscape review of what it is that you currently have and what are your aspirational goals. So how do you get from where the current status to the aspirational goals, and make sure that everybody's engaged in designing that plan, right? So it's all about voice, making sure that you have all the voices included in that common purpose, and then looking for where are there not only commonalities, but things that everyone can buy into and see that there's value either for the greater good or for themselves personally. After that, it becomes the exactly what you said, the hiring practices, and then the systems and structures for communication that we put in place. So we have all over this place our strategic values. I'm going to do this a lot because we believe in sustainability, so my lights are going to go off. So we believe that it's important that we orient people when they first come in, that we make careful decisions about who we bring into the organization, that they have a servant's heart, that they understand they're not coming into a hierarchical organization, they're coming into more of an organization where we all contribute and each voice is equal. There's a certain culture here that's been built from years and years of superintendents, and it's just become stronger over the past several years because we've seen how effective it is in changing Kern County.
Thank you. It's helpful. I want to just pause for a moment here. And again, for those of us who may be joining us a little bit late, feel free to enter questions at any time into the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and just get those in the queue, and I'll be turning to those shortly. So feel free to enter any type of question you'd like to ask Dr. Barlow. So Dr. Barlow, I just wanted to pivot for a second and think about, maybe a significant challenge that you have faced as a leader. And because obviously, it's not leadership isn't always easy. And I'm wondering if you can kind of maybe give an example of a challenge you faced in your career recently or from in the past, and how you met the challenge and you overcame it, and kind of what does this tell us about your leadership style and how you approach challenges generally.
Sure. So I can't do anything other than COVID-19. I mean, there's been nothing like it in our lifetime. I cannot tell you how much that illuminated the discrepancies and the systematic issues within our county and our country related to people and what they have in terms of the common, what I would think are standards of living. Not having connectivity to the internet, not having access to regular and quality healthcare, not having access to the food and the supports that they need to effectively, live and work out of their own home. We were not all in the same boat. It immediately became apparent that some people were in a dinghy and some were enjoying a very, luxurious yacht. And so for me, a person who's always been about kind of, looking at the inequities, it just drew a bright line underneath that. And so that was the biggest challenge, because we found out on late on a Friday evening, or not, it was Tuesday when we finally shut school. We were the last county in the state that said, that's it, we can't do this. We really knew our kids needed to be in school because that's where they were safe. That's where they were, they got the supports that they need. They got everything that they needed in terms of learning and social emotional support. But what we had to do is immediately bring all of our school leaders together. So the leadership team here at KCSOS is broken up by division. And so we have technology and maintenance, operations, transportation, human resources, communications, and everyone is a leader on our senior cabinet team, our instructional team, our student services, and they came together in and created their own task force. And their task force were they were the chair, and they went out and worked with other leaders within the school districts across Kern County, and leaned heavily on our larger districts that have more resources, our Kern High, our Bakersfield City, our Panama Buena Vista and Greenfield, CSUB, Kern Community College District. And we came together on the phone in a rapid pace, learned Zoom overnight. John Mendeborough is now an expert over a 6-hour period. And what we did is communicate and split up the tasks and become use our subject matter experts in a particular area to be able to go deep and then come back and report to the larger group of stakeholders and the decision makers. And so we set up those systems, those communication systems, those research systems to really deploy and lean into where our expertise lie. And we also trusted those who we empowered as task force chairs to get the work done and make decisions, and we gave them the resources they needed. So we got out of their way. When they said, we need this, if there was a policy or some kind of red tape in the way, the bureaucracy needed to be broken down. And in Kern High School District in Panama Buena Vista and Bakersfield City superintendents were on the phone with one another, they were talking about how they could share the MiFi spots, how they could share the meal distribution to ensure that everyone who didn't have connectivity could get connectivity. We had experts in our office who were working 24/7, Anthony Davis and team, to ensure that we in fact had an understanding of areas that didn't have MiFi. We worked with Brian Alsop at the county and sent equipped buses to go out to neighborhoods and just acquire devices and distribute them rapidly. So it's about leaning into what we'd already established through the Kern Education Pledge, which was a culture of trust and a system and structure where we all had accountability measures and a way to monitor, and then to just deploy it. And keep checking in with one another. For me, that challenge was both exhilarating, and completely depleting, because it never stopped.
Right. I mean, part of what I hear you say is, you were doing, it sounds like, front-loaded work well before the pandemic ever hit to develop a structure in which people were able to respond in the way they did, right?
Absolutely.
Because I think, you can't just start once the crisis has happened, right? You need, part of leadership sounds like it's, preparing in advance, and it's forming a capable team and a culture, before the crisis has happened, right?
That's exactly what we had.
Are there things that you've learned from this pandemic that have impacted your idea of what a leader can do, or what a leader should aim to do going forward, or has it affirmed particular ideas that you already had?
It's affirmed the idea that we're better together, and that, that's where the real strength comes, and we're able to move further and faster together. To me, the parable about the carrot, the egg, and the coffee, and you put it in the boiling water, and the carrot softens and basically crumbles, the egg hardens and it cracks, but the coffee makes the water better. That's what our team is. We are the coffee bean. And so it strengthened my belief in Kern County and in the good of the people within Kern County, the true belief in our ultimate need to have a purpose and to be here I think teaching and education is really a calling. We're all in it for a reason. We were drawn to it to help others. And so it brought out the very best in people. And we rose to that occasion, and we propped each other up when we fell down, because we did.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that reflection. And I want to, and also kind of on this theme of being better together, right, and working as a team, we have a number of questions in the queue from our audience, and I want to make sure I get to as many of these as possible. And again, everybody feel free to keep entering questions. Our first question comes from George Barrientos, so shout out to George.
George.
And George asks, how does your leadership style change between work and home? Are there any similarities?
Well, my husband would tell you yes. But I think that what I learned through my doctorate program is that I need to be more reflective of how I respond in each situation and in each setting. And so I would say, yes, it is different at work than it is at home, not terribly. One of the things that was important for me I went through the University of LaVerne program, and I talked early on in this presentation about self and really understanding yourself. And so I'm impatient. I want to get it done. I'm all about, being able to check things off and accomplish things, even though I want to get it through get things accomplished through people and with people. So I have learned that I need to suspend judgment, not make assumptions, and be a better listener. So that's my practice that I'm still working on every day.
Good lessons. Dr. Barlow, this question is from Lupe Soto, and Lupe asks, what is your favorite thing about being a leader?
Just seeing people shine. When you get to mentor someone, I'm at that stage where you get to really mentor young and emerging leaders, and you see them, whether it's at their first presentation or their first opportunity to be in front of senior cabinet or take on a project from beginning to end, and just working with them as they grow. It's just so rewarding, and you're giving back. So for me, that's teaching. We're always a teacher, right? I mean, once a teacher, always a teacher. And I absolutely enjoy that. I would say that's my very favorite part.
So Brianna Garcia asks, what if you don't, what if you're interested in leadership, but you don't have a good support system at home or in your life? How do you maintain a positive balance and still move forward in that pursuit?
That's really important, to find a support system. So here's the thing, remember to never give up. So it's go out and build and seek those people who will invest in you. and be your mentors. And sometimes that means reaching out and being vulnerable, whether it be to a teacher or a fellow colleague, someone within your organization or outside your organization who you greatly respect, and just inviting them out for coffee and saying, I'd like to, could you give me the gift of time? Could you give me 30 minutes of your time to better understand X or Y? And so, that is one way that I think those connections, those relationships are important. Enrolling in local programs that are available. The Network for Children puts on the Leadership Development Program. I'm a graduate from 1999. Enrolling in higher education and continuing to pursue your education, especially in those areas of leadership through CSUB. There's just a lot of avenues out there, both formal and informal, that are important. And then be a reader. I mean, absolutely look at those opportunities to read and learn from good works out there. I would also say, when an opportunity presents itself, walk through that door, even when it's scary. Open it up, walk through it, and take advantage of those small opportunities to show growth and celebrate.
So Mark Olson asked about references to the one book, One Bakersfield, One Kern Community Read program, which happens annually. This year, the text is Broadband, the Untold Story of the Women Who Made the Internet. And also he notes, the focus of celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. Marcus, with these things in mind, what are your thoughts on women's impact in society? Specifically, how do we further develop channels and avenues for women in leadership? What are ways that we can think about doing that, whether in our own lives or more generally?
I think it's important, and it's incumbent upon all of us to do that. First of all, it's how do we raise our children? What is it that we do as parents and as community members to contribute to the understanding that women and men are both capable of being in these leadership roles and are very successful. They bring different strengths and same strengths. It just depends on the individual. I think it's important in leadership roles to ensure that we have diversity. And it's not just of gender. We want to make sure that when we look at who we're bringing into leadership positions and who we're reaching out to, we need to be more intentional about diversifying our leadership. And I think the other thing is, sometimes people can be hard on one another, and we need to be a little kinder and a little gentler with one another and not quite so judgmental, because leadership looks different from one person to another. I talked about quiet leadership, and I talked about lots of different styles out there. Women's styles, some women's styles might be very different than men's styles in the traditional, style that people are accustomed to in terms of leadership. And so being open to that, and then looking at what the results are. What are the results of that leadership style? Are they as effective as a different style? So I think it's incumbent upon all parts of society, starting with our parenting.
Thank you for that answer. So Cynthia Jordan asks, is there a book you'd recommend? Something that has influenced you and your ideas on leadership that maybe you could recommend for our viewers tonight?
Oh my gosh, so I love to read. I subscribe to the Harvard Business Review. So if you want to subscribe to anything, it's always timely. They always have great articles, and a lot of them are on leadership. A book that I read early on is Leadership Challenge by Synchronous and Posner, and it really gives you some practical applications, and I love practical applications. I would say Brené Brown. I love Brené Brown. You can listen to her on audio, Daring Greatly, Dare to Lead, and she's funny, which is an added bonus. Patrick Lencioni, a local man who has done some remarkable work, like the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I've read a lot of his work. And then Stephen Covey, also very, very good. I have a whole list here that I could go through. Some of the things that help you with leadership, though, are like Drive by Daniel Pink. So what about autonomy and having purpose and making sure that we leave room for people to in their own work, in our office or in our organization, find what motivates them. And I could do the ones a lot of folks do, True North, you know, Bill George, and The Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell. I guess I think there's so much to learn from each different author that it's important that we really become well-read and invest some time in that. It's worth it.
Great, thanks for those resources. Number of excellent suggestions there. Dr. Barlow, this question comes from Alaya Anderson, and she writes, I work for KCSOS as a special educator. However, due to health problems, I have suffered a setback in my career. Did you ever experience a setback in your career? And if so, how did you handle it? Or what would be your advice in handling these situations to remain resilient in order to return to feeling like a strong leader in a leadership role?
Yeah. Resilience is absolutely critical. And it begins within, but you need a support structure. You need people who will help you and prop you up when there are times that are particularly strong or difficult rather. And yes, I've had setbacks. I've had several setbacks. I mean, I don't think you can be in leadership without having setbacks, but my case, I will share with you, I think I came out of it stronger. I definitely came out of it humbled. And I recognized that where I was before wasn't the right spot for me. So I was in business, and it was kind of a move that occurred, and I wasn't able to retool when I moved here to Kern County. And so I had to start from scratch, and I became a waitress and a housekeeper. And I worked 2 and 3 jobs while I put myself through school, first at Saracoso and then CSUB. And I leaned heavily on my husband, Steve, and my kids, you know, and my community around me to help me through it. And I think what's really important is that you know that if you've got the spark within you and that interest, just stick with it. Don't give up. It'll come.
Awesome, thank you. Rebecca Stevens asks, how would you go about getting cohesion among a team who disagree?
Yeah, that's important. You know what? It's okay to disagree. We want to disagree agreeably, right? So here comes your great facilitator guides, you know, practice. So you need to, I would say, either get them in a room or do off-site is what we call it, you know, kind of a retreat type of thing. And really use a skilled facilitator to surface what the issues are and what those individuals, why they disagree. And once you surface what they disagree on and why they disagree, you need to also find out what their commonalities are. You know, what is it they also commonly can agree upon? So it's important to go through that time where there's going to be, there's discomfort. And you have to be okay as a leader when people are uncomfortable, and you have to be okay helping them through that discomfort. It's called growth, and it's okay.
So Dr. Barlow, Donnelly Montano asked about this question of voice that you raised in one of your previous answers. And Donnelly says, well, you know, in this day and age, sometimes even though we have protests, public speeches, social media, a lot of times, you know, we feel like we don't have a voice or we're not being heard. So what do you do, or what have you done to kind of encounter or help others think through that issue about feeling like, well, I want to have a voice, but I'm not being heard. How do I be heard? And kind of if I'm developing as a leader, are there, you know, thoughts you have about that question?
Sure. So early on, Kern River Valley Collaborative, we observed there were some situations going on in the Kern River Valley that needed to be addressed. And there were some poverty issues, there were some substance use issues, there were other things that came to the forefront. So we did our research. But what was important about this is that we made sure that we went to the homes and the locations where people who we might not normally hear from would be, so that we could get their opinions, get their voice, and we recorded it. We, in front of them, would write the information out so that they understood that in fact we were recording their voice, their opinions, their thinking. And then afterwards, when it was transcribed, we went back and we checked with them and said, is this what you meant by this? Is this what, you know, your intent is, or what your beliefs are? And more importantly, when we came up with our solutions, we made sure they were also in the room helping develop the solutions. And then we checked with them to make sure that, you know, everybody became part of the process, is the fact of the matter. You have to have diverse stakeholders that are part of the entire process, from problem identification to solutions to then monitoring progress and implementing actions.
So let's see, the next question here. Roxanne Esparza asks, in terms of you mentioned kind of moving to Kern County and starting your career here, was there an experience that encouraged you and motivated you locally to become a local community leader in all these different capacities? Like what motivated you to take on these increasing levels of leadership and responsibility?
You know, I didn't really pursue it. I was asked along the way. It wasn't something that I aspired to. Never even thought about it, to be honest. I just love being, when I first moved here, I was in business, and then I decided to study psychology, and philosophy was my minor. And at the end of that period of time, I thought, gosh, I really need to go back to work. I have 3 young children at home. My husband, you know, would like me to contribute. And so, and then I started thinking about it, you know, the best way to affect a change or serve others was to be a teacher. And so I went into education. And you know what? Every single role since then, I've been asked to apply for. So there are things that I did that kind of probably, you know, working through others, that probably highlighted where my heart was and where my mind and my intent was. And so that's why, you know, others would reach out and say, why don't you think about applying for the position of the Healthy Start facilitator, you know, program coordinator? Why don't you think about applying for the superintendent of the Kernville Union School District? And then I got an invitation to come here to the county office and work. And so really it was about following what my passion has been, which is helping the underserved and the marginalized and bringing voice to those who might not have voice at the table. And it's just kind of flowed from there.
So Beatrice Toy has a practical question, but an important one. So you mentioned foreign kind of response, your team's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and a huge issue was connectivity, right, to the internet and developing hotspots. Are there resources for when people are having, you know, when they don't know how to get connected, or their hotspot isn't working? Are there resources and support systems that your office has in place, or a person that Beatrice could reach out to about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So on our website, we do have a COVID-19 response box. And in that box, there's a lot of different resources, including how to get connectivity. And I can tell you the school districts in Kern County networked through our office. I mentioned Anthony Davis earlier and Christian Shannon, and we have access and provided a lot of access and hotspots, but more importantly, the districts were able to obtain and deliver hundreds of thousands really of hotspots in our community. And so it's we're not done. There's still more work to be done, and we're always looking for those who are, you know, having difficulty connecting, because that's a basic need. So definitely give us a call. We'll connect with you and make sure that you get to the right resource.
So Chandra Kamuri asks, what do you see as some of the key challenges for public education in Kern County over the next 10 years?
Well, I think that this actually, I believe in the positivity, looking at the positive silver linings and things. So the COVID-19 pandemic caused us to push the stop button and really rethink education. And I believe that this will impact forever how we live, work, and learn. And when we think about education, so much of our work is now integrated with technology, artificial intelligence. And so students really do need to understand how to use and access technology from an early age. It provides much more freedom and flexibility. So I can see us in a hybrid model in the future, more of a hybrid type offering. And I do believe, though, there are some folks and some children who just absolutely would not, be successful in that. Our earliest, youngest children absolutely need to have that in-person time and that socialization. And even, as a senior in high school, you need to have that. But I guess what I'm saying is there's going to be a blend. There's going to be something different with how we educate in the future. There's going to be synchronous learning and asynchronous learning, meaning that we're not all learning at the same time. We're learning when it's convenient to us, and we can combine it with our other important family matters. And those other family times or interests that might not allow us to follow a traditional, what is truly an agrarian calendar. That's what education is based upon, right? Mm-hmm. An industrial area, an agrarian calendar, and that's just not what the future needs. We need to change to our workforce needs. So we need to develop pathways similar to what we see in Europe, and we're doing it here in Kern County. A lot of great work between the CSUB and BC and Cerro Coso and just really Taft. Great work in terms of laying out pathways so that it's very clear for students from entry into kindergarten all the way through and their exit into a career or higher education, that they understand the pathway and it's not convoluted, it's connected from organization to organization. So I think that's really the change. How do we make that happen? How do we orchestrate that? And that's been the work of the Kern Education Pledge. And that's why when 47 school district superintendents and the institutes of higher education all committed to that pledge, and they committed to sharing data and a common purpose and sharing resources, it meant that we were forever going to change Kern County and the educational services we deliver. And it's proven out. We have higher graduation rates in the state of California. We have fewer chronic absences, and we have better rates of improving our reading and our math skills. Now, do we have a bigger gap? Absolutely we do, and that's why it's such an important matter. Mm-hmm. But I think COVID-19 is changing how we're thinking. And when you talk about collaboration, Lisa Gilbert, Dr. Herrera, Dr. Gilbert, her team, Dr. Arias, had hundreds of educators from across the county who came together for countless hours over weeks on end, from the first day we shut down March 17th, all the way through September. Even now, they worked together to create a common platform, a Canvas learning system, where anyone can download the content or participate in the content, K through 12, English language arts, mathematics, social and emotional, science, and on top of that, it's in 37 different languages, and it gives support to those who are special needs. So I guess what I'm saying is, there are people who are creative, they're innovative, they sat down with their own energy and their own time and they recreated education. So hats off to the heroes that came out during this COVID-19 pandemic. We owe them a debt of gratitude.
Well said. Dr. Barlow, there's a number, I just want to pause and just say thank you everybody for the excellent questions, right? There's so many great questions coming through. This one deals with taking and giving feedback. What is the best way to deal with harsh feedback from a leader, or to give harsh feedback?
To a leader?
So I guess, yeah, I guess that's kind of open-ended. So I think one is how you deal with harsh feedback from a leader, and then maybe how you give difficult feedback, to somebody.
Okay, so harsh feedback, I sure hope it's coming with good intent. I think the intent is everything here. If the intent is to help the person grow, and the leader is being courageous in speaking truth about a growth area, then it should be considered as a gift and really an opportunity to see a part of yourself that you might be blind to. And it might hurt at the time. You might even cry. You might even afterwards, have to really take a few beats. Yeah. Okay, this happened last week to me. Are you understanding this? So in terms of being the leader and giving the feedback, I think as a leader, we need to be really sensitive to making sure it's the right time, that it's very direct, that it's very honest, that it's done empathetically, that our intent is to grow the person, and not to in any way diminish their joy and their interest in their work. And then as a the term that we use in research is follower, but as a team member, to give feedback to a leader, boy, that is a test of being a leader. If a leader reacts poorly, when someone gives them feedback, they're not going to receive feedback again. And there ends their leadership journey and their learning. And so it's really important as leaders that we listen with grateful hearts, that we're open, that we don't just start thinking of, oh, that's not true, and here's why, and I can prove it wrong in the back of our head. We need to really open up our hearts and open up our minds, take notes, because you might not remember exactly what was said, and then thank the person after they gave you that really good feedback. Pause, take time to reflect, really be reflective. And then check in with others. Just check in with those trusted people around you who are going to tell you the truth because they're courageous and because they only want what's best for the organization and for your growth. And they'll help you validate it and make sense of it, and then kind of weave it into your leadership practice of what you need to improve upon.
Thank you. Dr. Barlow, Stephanie Castro asks, as a leader, responsibility is inherently, it's kind of a constant, right, of your life. What tips can you share in terms of avoiding burnout, given all the responsibility and kind of the constancy of that?
Okay, I can tell you all the things that people say, right? So exercise, eat right, surround yourself with friends, make sure that your family understands your schedule, but really, those things really are important, and you have to schedule it. I mean, sometimes it's just so easy to push it aside and think that you're superhuman, but you're not, and then you might fall apart at a time when you're really needed. So it's important to practice that. That's that self-discipline and the humility of understanding that we're all human and we need to recharge. I think having time to, when I say self-reflect, whether you meditate or you're prayerful or how you do this, but there's got to be this spiritual opportunity to connect and go within and understand how your words and your actions impact and ripple through the entire world, and then just really appreciate that and appreciate everything that you've been given in life and be grateful. So I like to keep a gratefulness journal. That's been my latest way to kind of recharge. That doesn't mean I won't be, in the fetal position sometimes through this COVID-19 pandemic, but I also get up and I start my next day, and I'm really excited because I'm surrounded by phenomenal people who are truly committed to this work, and we love what we're doing, and we love the people we work with, and it makes a difference. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, I think that's excellent. There's a lot to think about, and we have two more questions here. One is from Rebecca Stevens, who asks, "Are you able to, or how are you able to delegate responsibilities efficiently in your work? How do you do that?"
Oh yeah, yeah. You don't live in large organizations without being able to delegate, and so it starts with trust. You know, you really have to have a trusting relationship and a culture of trust. Stephen Covey. Work with your leadership team to establish the, structures and systems for communicating with one another, and then with trust and great responsibility, you imbue that responsibility, those decisions, to your leadership team. And I have not been disappointed. Every time I've given large projects or goals within a strategic plan to anyone within this leadership team I've had the honor of serving with, they impress me. They exceed my expectations. And so I think as a leader, it's really important not only to delegate, but then to check in, to support, to see if, are there any resources you need that I'm not giving you? Are there other opportunities to, move things around on your plate to make this a more achievable goal? But it's absolutely imperative to delegate.
So Dr. Barlow, Amelia Lozano asks this really interesting question. Has there ever been a time when your beliefs have been really unpopular, and how did you deal with it? Did it ever make you question your beliefs and who you are? If so, how did it affect your effectiveness as a leader, and how did you overcome it?
Wow, that's deep.
Yeah.
Okay, let me start with have my beliefs been unpopular? Yes. And an early one, and an early one was when we were working in the Kern River Valley. There was a need to bring together people to help those who were impoverished and provide after-school programs, provide family resource center support structures, apply for grants to bring food, clothing, social services, parent training, and that type of thing to support families that really just needed some extra support. And so we started this movement, and it wasn't popular with some folks who felt very strongly that that was a gift of public funds or a gift of government funds. My father always believed that we should pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, but sometimes there are no bootstraps, and sometimes it's just much more advantageous for the entire community to help raise the tide for all boats to rise. I'm using a lot of mixed metaphors, but I guess my point is, my superintendent at the time, so I was a third grade teacher, came into the school and had my principal call me out of my classroom into the office and said to me, "Do you have tenure?" And I didn't. And, I was out there doing surveys and activating the community and holding meetings in public libraries, and I didn't have tenure. And so I said, no, I don't. And it was a direct threat on my livelihood and my family's livelihood. But I said, no, I don't, but that's okay. I was looking for a job when I got this one. And so, I was fortunate that my principal supported what we were doing and said, that's not Mary's intent, and defended, what we were doing. And other things changed. And so the work obviously blossomed and worked out. But it didn't really change who I was or where I was going to go. It just made it more difficult. It was a challenging time. And it really solidified how I felt about what was right and why I was doing it and what I was willing to risk to make sure, and my family was willing to, we checked with them to make sure that they were willing to do that too, to move that initiative forward.
It's a really helpful example. Dr. Barlow, you mentioned in some of your earlier responses kind of the importance of teachers, right? Kind of the biggest way to impact people's lives. And this comes from Leisha Mears, and she says, how can one apply ethics and leadership as an aspiring teacher in a classroom?
Wow, that's so important. So it's how do we teach the boundaries for how we want to act, how we want to treat others, and how our classmates treat one another. So we're living it through example, but we're also teaching it, because children learn that they learn that through example, and by calling it out, whether it's through Aesop's fables or parables. It's really important to teach those ethical lessons at an age and a stage that they understand, because they will apply them throughout their learning career. So for me, it's setting the container in the classroom and making sure that the most important thing you do at the beginning of the year, but then practice it throughout the year, is making that classroom a safe environment where everybody's friends. We're all together in this. There goes my sustainability. And at the end of the day, it's just really important that they know that you care about them and their personal development, as well as their educational development.
Well said. And this will be our closing question. It's going to combine questions from Naftali Perez and Shirley Wammock. What is one or two essential characteristics that you believe every leader should possess?
Courage and honesty.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. So again, I just want to say huge thanks to Dr. Barlow for you taking the time to be part of this conversation. It's fascinating, practically useful, inspiring, all those things together. It's why we do this series. So thank you for being with us. And thanks to the audience for showing up. Like, you know, these events don't happen without you. And your questions are, for me, just super inspiring too. I just love the way people can engage in this way and ask these wonderful questions and come together as a community. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And with that, I just want to say good night to everybody and stay safe. And we'll see you at the next Kegley Institute event. Visit our website, csub.edu/KIE, or follow us at Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram to find out more about what we're doing. And we'd love to hear from you. All right, everybody, take care and have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Michael.